In this video, I'll be showing you how to both create an ad schedule and monitor an ad schedule's performance in order to make adjustments in order to improve the overall performance of your Google Ads account. We're going to be doing this every 4 weeks. We're going to do this on the campaign level, and we're going to set our date range to 10 weeks. So to get started, we're going to go over to Google Ads. We're going to click on Insights and Reports, then when and where ads showed. Then from here, we're going to be in the when ads showed tab. And from here, we're going to first review the days that our ads have been showing. So make sure that we have this set to about 10 weeks, excluding today. Click apply. Then we are also going to select the campaign that we want to build our ad schedule for or monitor our ad schedule's performance. I'm going to click on this one. And from here, we can see that this campaign doesn't really have a ton of conversions to go off of. Really, if we're not working with more than 20 conversions in that 10-week span, we don't have enough data in order to make any changes. So from what we can see in this campaign, we clearly do not have 20 conversions. So we are going to move on to another campaign to make these adjustments. In this campaign, we can see that we clearly have more than 20 conversions over the course of this 10-week span. So the first thing that we're going to be looking for are low conversion rates and low cost per conversions. Really what we're looking for is an obvious day or days that are not converting at a very high rate, or they have an extremely high cost per conversion. So something that we can see right off the bat is that the two lowest performing days are Wednesday and Saturday. So what we can do with this information is we could, if we had a very limited budget, we could exclude these 2 days because it's obvious that their cost per conversion is much higher than the campaign as a whole. As you can see here, we're looking at approximately 30% higher. Typically, we like to leave these types of days in, even though that's a significant jump in cost per conversion. We're really looking for cost per conversions or cost per conversions that are 2 times higher than the average cost per conversion, or conversion rates that are half of what the average conversion rate is for the entire campaign, because we want to allow Google to optimize as best as possible. And obviously there are going to be days that are going to be a little bit more expensive than the average, and then obviously there are going to be days that are going to be a little less expensive than the average. However, if you're on a tight budget and you really need to pinch every penny, this is data that would be applicable, and we could use this data in order to make a ad schedule that prevents our ads from being shown on these days. However, if you do have a very limited ad budget, you're typically not going to have enough data in order to make that judgment. But moving forward, we're going to look on an hour-by-hour basis. So making sure that we're in the campaign that we want to look at, and it accidentally switched accounts on us. Here we go. Now that we are back in another campaign, as we can see here, we're actually only showing up for 15 hours of the day, and this is because we already have an ad schedule. So we're currently monitoring the current performance of the ad schedule to see if we maybe need to filter our ad schedule even further, meaning remove more hours that our ads are actually showing. So typically what we're searching for are hours on the either end of our ad schedule that are not performing very well. You can also look for some of the peak times for Google Ads. So a lot of the times during like the work day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., there's that break during the afternoon. We're talking around 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. where the highest number of Google searches are happening. And so typically there's a lot more competition during these hours, and you can find some hours that you may not want to show up for because the cost per conversion is much higher. So first we're going to look at either end of the spectrum to see if at the beginning of our ad schedule there's not a lot of performance, or at the end of our ad schedule there's not a lot of performance, to see if there's potentially some room for adjustment. So as we can see here, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then 7 p.m. all the way to 9 p.m. has almost zero performance. So this could be that this is on the tail end of when we created a campaign. So what we're going to look at is our current ad schedule. So we're going to go to our ad schedule down here and see when our ads are actually available to show. So you can see that they're available to show from 7 a.m. all the way to 7 p.m. So when we're actually looking by hour during this ad schedule, these times right here are not applicable because it's no longer showing. So we can ignore the data for 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So now we would just be looking for other times throughout the day that our ad may be having a much higher cost per conversion or a much lower conversion rate. So something that we can see right here is that this 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. slot is not performing very well. It's got half the conversion rate that our campaign has on average, and it's also got double the cost per conversion that our campaign has on average. And after looking through the rest of these data points, there's no other time period that comes even close to this poor performance as this 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. spot. Something to keep in mind is that since our ad is showing from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., we would want to look to see if the performance from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. is also performing bad. So we're going to look at the 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. spot, and then we're also going to look at the 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. spot. And we can see that it's not worth condensing the ad schedule. It's really, we would just want to avoid this 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. spot in order to cut down on this high cost per conversion. And we can see that it has enough conversions for this data to be relevant. So what we're going to do based on this data is remove our ad from showing from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. So we're going to go and click edit. And basically from here, we are just going to, we have this in 2-hour increments. And so we're just going to make this a 1-hour increment, click save, and our ad schedule will be adjusted so that the ad no longer shows up at that high cost per conversion time. Another thing to keep in mind, when you first originally create this ad schedule, make sure that you are monitoring it for 2 to 4 weeks to see if your campaign performance either improves or decreases. If it decreases, you're going to want to go back to the drawing board, let your campaign run at all hours again, and then check the data to see if there's possibly you condense the data too much. So what I mean by that is since we have limited the hours from showing to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., it's possible that if the performance had decreased, we would actually want to try showing the ads from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. to see if our performance actually improves or drops after making that adjustment. And basically, we can expand it by 4-hour increments until we see a positive change in our campaign performance. Because typically for most service businesses, people are not looking for your ads at these late times in the day. Typically, we like to start with excluding 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. for most of the companies that we work with. And then after we've excluded those times, then we go and we look at the when and where ads showed section to see if we can find any other hours of the day that are not performing very well. So we're going to go look at one other ad in order to get a better understanding of how to go about creating an ad schedule for the first time. So what we can see in this campaign is we really don't have enough conversions in order to make an accurate judgment by hour, because we would really like to see at least a few conversions during every hour. Obviously, if we don't see, we can't force conversions to happen during certain periods of time. So if it's possible that it's just not going to happen during these time periods, and as we can see here, we do have around 50 conversions over this 10-week time span. But as an example, I just want to be able to show you that you can go back a few more months in order to get more conversion data if you haven't made a ton of adjustments over the past few months. If you're making adjustments on a pretty regular basis. You don't want to go back more than about 10 weeks because the data won't be as accurate on a hour by hour basis, because each change causes your campaign performance to vary, and thus you don't want to have data from 5 months ago interacting with data that has happened in the past month, because changes that happened 3 months ago have affected the data for your campaign over the 3-month period. But in this example, we're going to use it as if we have made a ton of changes. So what we're going to show here, because this is a typical campaign performance over a 10-week span, is getting around 50 conversions, especially for a relatively low budget. This budget for this campaign is around $15 a day. So we're actually getting some decent conversion data in order to work with it here. So just wanted to let you know that it is an option to go back, but your data becomes less and less useful as you go back farther. But if you don't have enough data in the past 10 weeks, it's totally fine to go back farther in order to collect enough data in order to make an accurate adjustment to your campaign, because you don't want to make a bad adjustment for lack of data. So as we can see here, we've got 24 hours that are showing. So this means that we haven't made an ad schedule yet. So what we are looking for is both high cost per conversions, low conversion rates, and low amounts of conversions. So first we're going to go down here to the bottom to see what our average conversion rate is, what our average cost per conversion is, and use this information in order to make judgments on what hours of the day we don't want our ads to show for. My typical go-to when first looking at a campaign in order to determine what ad schedule is to look at the times of night that you would expect people to be asleep and not actually looking for whatever service you offer. So some weird ones that can happen where people would be searching late at night are like skydiving companies. Maybe some e-commerce brands have people that are late night shopping, but a lot of the times when people are looking for services, such as a dentist office, they're going to be looking at normal hours of the day. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the later parts of the night. So like our 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., we'll try to find our 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., and 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. A lot of these times we like to see what the performance is, to see if we just want to do a blanket ad schedule to block off these times a day, or if they are for some reason actually getting good performance. We don't just want to block these off because they typically don't perform well, because it could be the case that your campaign actually is getting good performance out of these weird times of night because there's just not a lot of competition. So it's easier to get your ad in front of people that are going to convert. So what we're really looking for are groupings of hours that we can block off in bulk. So something right off the bat that we can see here is the bottom 3 hours in terms of performance is 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 9 p.m. to 10 p.m., and 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. So we can pretty confidently say that these are hours that we don't want to show up for, so we can create a blanket ad schedule around these hours. So where we only show up from, let's say, 12 a.m. all the way to 8 p.m. We're also going to want to look at the hours right around this chunk, because it's clear that this chunk isn't performing well, so it's possible that this chunk has a few others that are not performing well around it. So we're going to want to look for the 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. spot, which actually shows up right here, which is pretty odd that the performance is that much better just 1 hour after this little chunk. And then we're going to look for the 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Scrolling all the way up, and we can see here this one also has pretty decent performance in terms of conversion rate, conversions, and cost per conversion. So really, we don't want to block those hours off either. So we're going to start with blocking this chunk right here. We also have another chunk that we can see that's not performing super well, this 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. spot. We can see 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. So we're also going to look for, we have 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., and then we've got a 2-hour time span in between these two. So we're going to look to see if there's a possibility of blocking off 5 a.m. all the way up to 11 a.m. So we're going to scroll up and try to find the 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. spots. So we can see right here, their performance is doing too well for us to consider blocking them. As you can see here, they've got 2 conversions apiece, and their cost per conversion is pretty decent. And then we can also come back and see that these spots, while not excellent and only getting 1 conversion apiece, the cost per conversion just isn't terrible enough for us to consider blocking it. So based on this data that we're seeing right here on an hour by hour basis, we're going to block off the 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. spot. Before we go down and do that, we're going to check the day by day performance to see if there's a specific day that we should not be showing up for either, because the cost per conversion is just too high. So something really odd that we can see right off the bat is that Tuesday is just not performing well in the slightest. All these other ones, we can see here, Thursday is not doing great either, but this is a real outlier. So when we have outliers like this, it's always helpful to go back. And even though going back farther means the data isn't as reliable, it's going to help us make a better assessment if Tuesday is actually that bad or if it just had a bad time period. So as you can see here, it's actually not as bad as we thought it was. And so this is why we always double check our assumptions with more data, because if you go in using just that 10-week period and make an adjustment, and it turns out that if you went back another 10 weeks to get that 20-week period worth of data, we would actually see that Tuesday actually isn't performing as horribly as we thought it was. It's clearly still the worst performing, but it's not it's not the $80 cost per conversion that we originally saw. So it's not something that we would necessarily want to block off, because obviously we're looking for time periods that have a cost per conversion that is 2 to 3 times higher than the average cost per conversion. Anything lower than that, we want to leave it in, because we want to allow Google to optimize. Because as you can see, Google is doing the optimization process pretty effectively, because on average, Tuesday isn't getting that $80 cost per conversion. It's actually down to 20. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when creating an ad schedule. Now, if we really need to pinch pennies and get as low a cost per conversion as possible at the risk of not getting as many conversions, it's definitely something that we can remove from our ad schedule, but we are not too concerned about that, because we want the overall performance of our account to continue running smoothly, and we want to be able to bring in a predictable number of conversions. So we're okay with a little bit higher cost per conversion there, because we have lower cost per conversions on like Sunday, Monday, and Saturday that average out to get us that low cost per conversion. So to create that ad schedule, we're going to come down here. We're going to click edit, and you can go watch our creating the ad schedule video. We have an entire video specifically dedicated to actually how to create an ad schedule, but in this video I just figured we'd go over it really briefly. But if you've got more questions, go and watch that video. So the time periods that we wanted to prevent, we're actually going to go back and check those. Let's see, we're going to check hour. The time periods that we want to block off. And this is something that is exactly why we double check it. You can see that previously when we were looking at just 10 weeks, the 8 p.m. all the way to 11 p.m. was performing really poorly. But when we go back and look at it, we can actually see that 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. actually isn't performing as bad as we thought. So another reason to always double check your data. You can still see that 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. isn't performing well, so we're still going to block those days off. But it's always a reason to go back and check more data after you've checked your most recent data. So using that, we're going to come down here. We're just blocking off 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Create ad schedule, click edit. We're showing all days. We're not going to block any of the days. And we're going to show from 12 a.m. all the way to 8 p.m. And then we're going to add another one that shows from 10 p.m. all the way to 11:45. Actually, we can go back. We can make that 12 a.m. so that way it doesn't even prevent us from showing during that 15-minute period. It just stays consistent. We also show in our other video how you can create multiple different segments inside your ad schedule in order to get better adjustments, but obviously go watch that other video on how to do ad schedules in order to get a better idea of how to do that. That pretty much wraps up the video on how to adjust your ad schedule and view your time-based data in order to make adjustments, in order to improve your campaign. I know this one's a little bit longer when it comes to the management side of things, but feel free to reach out to Creekside Marketing. We'd be more than happy to help you look through your campaign, give you an audit, see what things you can do in order to improve your account. We'll see you in the next video.